to answer it, I think it's easier to take you back a step or two, really, and explain who I am, how I came to do what I do. So I often share this story. It's in my book. It was that thing of my father was a military man for the end of the Second World War. One of my uncles was also involved in the war. My grandfather was an ARP warden. So I guess there's a military thread, if you like, to my life, particularly growing up. And I think my father was really keen to see me join the military for all of the values that the British Army bestows, the camaraderie, the sense of values and ethics and so on. And all of that has certainly been the case. So I found myself as a schoolboy really didn't enjoy school particularly, found it difficult to concentrate on certain topics. Others I was better at. Curiously, maths was one of my weakest subjects, and here I am doing spreadsheets galore and financial proposals. So it's funny how the world turns, really. But I think for me, I never envisaged doing what I do now at all. I thought I would be a career soldier, and to that end joined the army when I was 18. Thought I would be involved in battlefield fuel supply, which is quite an interesting topic. But then quite quickly, to my astonishment, got 4 A-levels, and the army said, "Oh, we'd like you to be an officer," which wasn't really kind of in my plan as such. So life took a different turn quite quickly, transferred to what was then the Territorial Army, still serving 40 years later. So it's a whole different career, almost like a kind of corporate world, as it were. But the opportunity to get into what I do still didn't emerge for quite some time. So I ended up getting a job working in the print industry. So that was great. So I got well trained in a technical, creative industry. Found it really interesting. They put me through sales training, so I got exposed to sales, and then got headhunted to go and work for a design company who were one of my customers. Got me into the world of graphic design and creativity, which then got me interested in advertising. I blagged my way into an ad agency, worked on TV advertising, all of this kind of ridiculously steep learning curve, I guess. And then became a specialist in direct marketing, and that's what led me ultimately into what I do, because in 1996 I got headhunted by a chap who'd run a big agency group and kind of sold me the dream of one day my son will also be yours. And I'd had a boss who'd said to me, "Look, I think you've got what it takes. You've probably got the energy, the enthusiasm to have your own business, and maybe you should think about that." And I hadn't really thought about it until then. It sort of put a worm in my head, I guess. And that was the route that took me into the world of marketing. So I took that business, grew it, did about $6 million in sales over the next 6 years. I started with nothing, ended up with blue chip clients like JD Sports and Sainsbury's Wine, and we did all the home shopping platform for ice and frozen food. So quite major clients really in that journey. And I loved it. It was great, but also it was really hard work. You know, it was kind of classic startup really. And what was interesting was in part of that journey, my then boss, who allegedly wanted to hand it on to me, had the opportunity to what I now would call a capital event. So in order to grow the business, I said, we need some working capital. He was in his 60s, didn't want to put the money into the business, but could see that we needed to move forwards. And I found an investment company, don't think they exist anymore, but a company called Barwell, who were going around putting money into agencies. In some cases, all of it, some cases, some of it. So we structured a deal where they were going to buy 65% of the company. That would give my then boss some cash and give me the working capital that I wanted to grow the business more quickly. And that was an interesting experience doing that whole fundraising process. What emerged out of that was one of the lessons I've always taken with me is we got saddled with cross charges and management charges from the holding company, which didn't really work. So we circled back round to some sort of deal, which became weirdly the buyer paying my boss, my colleague, for him to take the company back, which was like, okay, it's a bit weird, but it worked. And what was also interesting, it was a catapult, because shortly afterwards we won the JD Sports account and the business really took off. So lots of lessons out of that. One of them was on the day of completion, I I vividly remember sitting in the lawyer's office. They were in one room, we were in another, and our lawyer coming in and saying, I've got good news and bad news. The money's ready to go, but they want 75% for the same money. And that was obviously a very difficult moment for my boss, because what does he do? You know, we'd spent the money metaphorically in our heads. We knew what we were going to do with the cash, and then all of a sudden we're not got the deal that we thought. So that taught me a lot about how to transact in good faith, not in bad faith, how to not try to chip away at deals, but have an ethical approach really to what you will do and what you won't do, and don't try and screw people over. Nonetheless, it was my intro, and it kind of got me going. And then when I split from him, because I didn't get the company in a way that it was promised, I decided to go and explore the world of M&A, and that led me to my first 2 deals in 2006. And that's really the start of the journey. That's what took me to this place. So I just went and did it. I figured out what a leverage buyout was. I learned some of the core techniques. I figured out how to raise the finance, combination of what I learned in business and what I learned about the process, really. And successfully acquired 5 companies, emerged out of that period with another growth factor. So grew 2 other companies from nothing to multiple 7-figure revenue. Learned lots of stuff along the way, but what was interesting is how people come into me saying, how did you do that? So that's really where the book came from. So Business Magic was born from that experience, just sharing with people what I did, which was nice. And then I thought, well, I had a coach actually said to me, what would you do if money was no object? And I've always liked training, coaching, and helping people, particularly in the medium of sport. I'm a mountain leader, but I never really thought about that as a way to make money. And then I looked around and I saw, as I mentioned, this guy who was sort of teaching how to buy distressed companies. Thought, well, it's no different to what I do, but I do it differently. The core principles were the same, so I had that kind of validation moment. But I think for me, it was the excitement of being able to share my knowledge and turn that into a commercial enterprise, which really got me going. And we created the Elite program, taught lots of people, been very successful. We're now up to 140 million of completed revenue transactions across multiple sectors, different sizes of companies. And that's really kind of the journey, but that's how I got into doing it. It was to solve a business problem, which was how do you grow without working 80-hour weeks, essentially, beyond a certain level? How do you get past that? And acquisitions, fundamentally for me, was the way to change that paradigm of startup, grow, organic. Always seems to get to a point where it's hard to go beyond that, particularly for a startup business, really. So that's it in a nutshell. That's how I got to do what I do today, and nothing in my life has ever been planned, or any plan never quite works out the way I thought it would. So that's kind of the evolution, really, of that particular journey. Blimey, that's a tough question. Why should you listen to me as a coach? Well, I think because I do it. I have now acquired 10 companies, ranging in size up to 5 million in revenue. I've stuck to what I call the SME space, I guess. So small and medium enterprises, probably at the smaller end of the spectrum, below 1 million EBITDA. I have the battle scars of success and failure, and unlike, as far as I can tell, most of the coaches out there, I'm perfectly willing to share with you what went wrong, what was successful, what wasn't, what do we learn from it, how do we navigate around that next time. But I still have that appetite, I still have that desire to be active in the marketplace, and I'm still active in buying companies into my own portfolio. So I think, as far as I know, I share that knowledge, that experience, both the past experience and the current experience, and what's working, what isn't working, what's effective, what isn't effective, all the constant skill improvement by being active in that marketplace with all the people that are in my club. And whether it's the live Tuesday calls, whether it's the coaching program, which we still run, which we won't do for much longer, whether it's sort of in the broader aspects of the masterclasses that we're going to be doing with business owners. Whatever the forum, I will always share openly the experience that I've got, what works, what doesn't work, and try my best to help people to be successful and to enjoy the upsides. I've had many upsides in this process, really, really good upsides. Made lots of money, lost money. It's not how much you make, it's how you keep hold of it. It's often a phrase which I think I wish I'd known a few years ago. So a lot of that governs the way that I think and the way that I behave. What are the business owner benefits I've experienced in that course of time, and so on. So what we do is life transformational. I'm really proud of that, and that's why I think you should listen to me. What you see is what you get. This is me. I'm not any different outside of the camera, outside of the interview room. If you meet me in a bar, you'll get exactly the same conversation. So if you like that, if you like me, then come and join me. But if it's not for you and you're looking for some other kind of guru, then I'm not that guru. But I hope that answers the question. That's a great question. How much money are you going to make? Well, as always, it depends. So let me frame it in this way. So depends where you're starting from. If you're wanting to get out of, say, a corporate job, then you should be thinking about how much a particular business is going to deliver. Remember, the reason people start a business or buy a business is because the one thing they want back is control, time, freedom. They're fed up having a boss telling them what to do. They think they can do a better job for themselves. Those are the compelling reasons why people get into business. And money usually is somewhere in there, but it sort of flows with it. So if you've got a corporate job, you will have an income that is covers your personal overhead. And if you're in a corporate role, it's probably quite a high overhead. So you're either in a place where you might be mortgage free or maybe not. So it all depends what your overhead is. Is that business going to deliver for you a replacement salary, and it offers the opportunity to grow as well? There's no point buying a business that you can't grow. So those are the two criteria. Equally, if you're a solopreneur, for argument's sake, then you might be looking for a business to give you the revenue that you aspire to. Nothing wrong with that at all. But rather than doing a startup with all the risks associated, buying a business will catapult you beyond the risk factors of a typical startup. So those are the individuals that I coach. Those are the reasons why those kind of people get involved in acquisitions. If you're a business owner, it's a different perspective. Now, that's how I started. I wanted to grow my business by acquisition, by buying my supply chain. And so for me, it wasn't so much about revenue, it was about growth of the business. And cash would have flowed from that. The same with a property investor. Let's say you're a property investor, you've got a portfolio, it's delivering you revenue. This is an opportunity to expand your range of assets, if you like. And so revenue might be less of a driver. When I started to buy companies, because I'd left the business group that I'd grown, it was about cash flow for me. So I think I would encourage you to think about it in the simplest possible terms. If you're acquiring a business that can't pay at least $60,000 a year in addition to what you're currently getting, then I kind of question why you would want to do it. In 2017, I acquired a business that was generating an extra $120,000 in fee revenue into the management team, and I've seen bigger deals than that as well. So anywhere from a spectrum of, I'd say, kind of bottom end, 60,000, maybe up to 200,000, depending on the size of the business, the scope of the opportunity, and obviously you'd want to grow that. But the other thing to bear in mind is it brings with it the opportunity to have, business owner benefits like a nice car, perhaps support trips abroad, various other things that you would normally put through an expense account. But crucially, and this is the most important thing, never lose sight of the equity value. So even if you've got a modest income to begin with, what you're getting for yourself is equity value. And when that deferred consideration is gone, the debt's gone, all of that cash flow is yours. So in simple terms, to summarize then, somewhere between 60 bottom book, maybe 200, that's the kind of money that you should be thinking about earning in a year just from buying your first, second, third company. I'm going to say use the same phrase. It depends, but actually, in all honesty, I say to people, look, if you focus your time and manage your time effectively, use the default diary, then I try to encourage people to think about a 6-month period. Now, my book, the support program, the blueprint product, is all based around 5 key steps, and each one of those should be about a month of focused time. The worst case scenario is 90 minutes 3 times a week will give you momentum and traction, because there's an element of what we do where you sat twiddling your thumbs. You sent off for some information, you've tried to engage with a broker, you're having a conversation with a seller. There are natural pauses in the rhythm of the process. So it's hard to do it full time unless you're doing tons and tons of research as well, which isn't really necessary. So if you have that focused time, that disciplined approach, you'll get traction, you'll get momentum, and you follow those 5 steps that I've set out, it's almost impossible not to get a deal. But I talk about 6 months because there's always that kind of negotiation phase. You might need to raise some cash from funders, you might not, or depends. And then inevitably, you'll get deals where the sellers change their minds, things fall over, it doesn't quite work the way that you were hoping. But I think a sensible time frame to plan around is about 6 months from starting, being focused, disciplined, to getting that first deal. Maybe 8 months. The quickest anyone's ever done it in the club, I think, was about 4 months, and the slowest is actually 2 years, where they just kept going and kept going and kept going. And that stickability, that durability, that willingness to keep going is actually really crucial as well, because people do give up, they lose faith, they lose confidence, but it is a process. And I promise you, if you just keep working through the process, you can't not end up with a business once you stick to it. Do you need any money? Well, you need what I call shoe leather. So you're going to incur some costs, at least, the very least, travel, coffee, maybe lunch. The sort of the byproduct expenses of engaging in the marketplace. You should really be spending some money on your marketing infrastructure. So a CRM program, a website. Some of those core costs to at least give you credibility. And allow you to engage successfully in the marketplace. So yes, you will need to spend some money. At maximum, I would say, if you really pared it down, probably about £5,000 in the course of a year to get you traction and get you moving. But in terms of costs that people envisage, like raising a load of cash, paying lawyers, paying all sorts of advisors, you don't need any of that. That's all part of the process, that we show you how to do that on a contingent basis. So you don't need pots and pots of money. In other videos, I'll talk about the funding market. So if you're going to go for big deals, you're going to have to put 10 to 20% of the enterprise value. Sorry, not the enterprise value. The funding costs into that deal. But that's at the far end of the process. You probably have to reconcile yourself to providing a personal guarantee at some stage to a funder, but I often say that's kind of cash in lieu. Why wouldn't you do it? If you don't back the deal, then why would the lender? So your actual pure cost, financial cost, is really quite minimal. And what we're now doing in the club is making it even cheaper as well. So it's that expansion of knowledge and experience at a really low entry price, just to really help people to get to the level they need to. So I don't think you need to spend tons of money. I don't think it's important. You don't need to be doing masterminds. You don't need to be spending loads of money on coaching. You just need to be able to spend a bit of money on yourself to get your processes around deal flow going, and then really, just focus your time and get the results that you're looking for. Well, we're in the back end of 2023. We're going into 2024. This has been one of the most remarkable periods in history, in the economy. But the answer to your question is hell yeah, for a number of reasons. So, what are the things that you could invest your time in? Now, I use the example of time, return on time, as really the core question to tease out. Now, I did a property masterminding course way back in, I think, 2008, 2009. I love the course, still really good mates with Simon, who's the founder of that particular property education program. But one of the things that really struck me is I'd already bought a couple of companies before I did that course. And the reason I did the course was I was told you need to have, you know, a range of assets in your sort of portfolio. So property was one of them, business was another, maybe stocks and shares, all the classic things that we can invest into. What I found was when I compared the time I needed to put into property investing compared to the time I put into buying companies, given that I'd already bought a couple, just didn't compare for the return that I could get. So I loved the course, really helped expand my mindset, met some great people, but really it reinforced the point that I get much better return on my time in buying companies than I do from property. And that's not to decry property at all. And there's a guy called Brad Sugars, who I'm a big fan of. He talks about making money in business and invest in property. And for me, that's still a compelling approach. There are other assets that I invest my cash into. Since then, you know, development of the crypto world and other investment tools are really fascinating. And I share some of that in some of the videos and some of the content that we've got in the club area. But is this a good time to buy companies? It's a challenging time. You know, I think the UK economy, the world economy, is still struggling. I don't actually think the UK economy has particularly recovered since the financial crash of 2008. If you look at the successive growth of the UK economy in that intervening period, it's really pretty poor. And I think many of the government policies, high taxation, the social structure that we've got mitigate against the UK economy becoming particularly strong or successful over the next maybe 5 years unless something changes. Now, having said all of that, the flip of that is what have we got in terms of, you know, the UK economy? You've got the big listed companies, they're a tiny proportion of the overall percentage of companies. You've got thousands, hundreds of thousands of micro companies, and then you've got this wedge of owner-managed companies, small and medium enterprises, and they're increasingly owned by people who are in their 60s and 70s. I'm working on a deal where the owner's 89. It's nuts, and those people, a lot of their wealth is tied up in those businesses. If you look at what happens to companies that don't sell, I think something in the region of 30 to 40% of trading companies, successful companies making money, just end up closing. And that's a terrible loss to the economy. So I think that we as buyers represent a real need for the owners of those companies, to see the company succeed and carry on. If you think about the loss of employees and customers losing suppliers, suppliers losing customers, these are all compelling reasons to keep those companies alive. And then crucially, for me, we're serving a need. That's why I think now is a great time to buy these companies. And I'm an optimist. I think that we have the ability to make companies better. I think we have the ability to ride out the storm. I think the economy will find a way to fix itself. But even if we see modest growth in the businesses that we buy, if you think about it, if you use a traditional, you know, debt and DEFCON model, by the time you've paid down the debt and the deferred consideration, hopefully you've grown the company. You've bought yourself an amazing asset for you and your family in wealth creation. So these are all the compelling reasons why now is a great time to buy companies. This demographic shift is going to be with us probably for 10 years or more. So yeah, absolutely. You really should be in this marketplace. Not saying it's easy, not saying it's straightforward, but it's a wonderful opportunity for some time to come. And now is a really good time to start.